book of First Timothy. We're going to be in chapter 2. We're going to pick right back up with verse 11 where we left off last week. So there's a lot of good material there. First Timothy's got a lot of things. Remember that Timothy here is he's currently pastoring Ephesus at the time that this letter is written. He's pastoring the church at Ephesus. And Ephesus is a very grounded, very biblical church when we get to the book of Revelation. There's not an indication that they were always that way or that they started out that way, but rather that they ended up that way. And we see that they kind of had the top shelf of the early Christian leaders that came through there to teach. So they had the Apollos and they had the Paul, and now they have Timothy, and they've had Barnabas, and they had all these great guys come through and teach them. So they end up being this real good reservoir of biblical knowledge. So they were a very strong, learned, mature church. At the end. Now, here as Paul leaves Timothy, he leaves them with a church that's got some problems. It's got some mess going on. And so Paul now writes to Timothy this letter as he's instructing him as a pastor how to handle these difficulties, how to handle these struggles, how to set things right, how to create the culture within the church that needs to be there for it to grow and for it to be profitable, for it to be fruitful. And so we talked about before about that there is a code of conduct that we should see in the church. There also is a dress code that we should adhere to. It's not a strict dress code as far as measuring in inches or materials or things, but rather just an attitude dress code that we should dress appropriately to the purpose. This isn't Showtime at the Apollo. This isn't Star Search. It's not, a fashion show, but rather when we come together for the purpose of honor and glorifying God. And so anything that would get in the way of that is immodest. It's out of hand. It's out of place. And so we shouldn't strive in our apparel when we come in to the sanctuary. We come in for common worship. We shouldn't strive to be the center of attention, to be seen, or for anything to be said of us, but rather the whole intention should be to honor and glorify God. That people's focus is on Him, and it's not in any way on us, that we're not a distraction to the main purpose. And so that's what Paul's getting over to them. Now, we see in verse 11, here's where it gets dicey, okay? Here's where most of the time Southern Baptist churches don't preach this, and then in independent fundamentalist Baptist churches, they preach this every week, okay? So let's take a look at it. So it says in verse 11, it says, "Let a woman learn in silence with all submission. And I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control." All right. So every woman just got mad, right? Yeah, all right. Well, if y'all mad, y'all just throw something at red, okay? And leave me out of it, all right? But now here, we got to look. We've got an issue here. Now he's saying, we reading it in our Western mindset, okay, in our modern times, what we just read was women ought to be seen and not heard. But now in the day and age, when Paul wrote this was actually pretty liberating, because you know what the first word of that verse is? Let. Now, a lot of the pagan religions and a lot of the pagan culture, all women were simply a sexual object. They weren't to be educated. They weren't to be ingrained. They weren't to be valued. They were just simply, just a sexual object to be gratified, for men to pay to gratify themselves upon, and then just simply toss aside. And so a woman had one usage. It came to the Christian church. It said, "Nah, we don't want our women to be dumb. What do we want them to be? We want to be learned." That we're not just expecting them to be receptacles of sexual, a sexual conduit, but rather what we're actually looking for them to be is to be wives and to be mothers, to be culture builders in the home, that they have a value beyond their sexual function. And so here he's given a greater value to women inside the church than the outside world has. Because he said, no, we don't need to just, partition the women off and then bring the men in. And here we have this super secret, club of just men that here we have the secrets and we keep them dumb old women in the kitchen where they belong, No, what did he say? Let the women learn. He said, bring them in. Let them hear too. Let them see the instruction. Let them see the wisdom. Let them hear the word of God preached. Let them grow in grace and grow in understanding and grow in their relationship, that it's not simply a male exclusive or even a male centric religion, but rather it was one that everybody gets to learn and everybody gets to come in and everybody gets to gather around. And then he gives some exclusions here. Then he gives some qualifications on the accepting of the men, bringing them in. Let a woman learn in silence and in all submission. All right. So he's given the parameters of it. All right. Now, let me ask you this. Because when we read this, or if we're not careful, we'll read it with a very feministic view and we'll be very militaristic towards this or very aggressive against it. But would we ever allow a man to sit in church and be a disruption? No, we wouldn't allow that. We wouldn't allow that whatsoever. This is actually putting them on an equal footing because we would never allow a man to interrupt service. We'd never let a man be a constant disruption. We'd never let a man have a constant outbursts, during the sermon or during the worship to turn things about them. We wouldn't dare allow a man to do that. And all of a sudden, when we see let a woman learn in silence, we go, well, no, that's exactly the same way that we have with the men, right? We don't let the men be unruly. We don't let the men be out of hand. We don't let the men do any of that. And then he throws on the end of it there. He says, in silence, which is reverence. It is a quietness, okay? Because if everybody's talking, ain't nobody hearing. And then he says, with all submission. We're showing the submission. He goes into submission, which there is categories here. So we have God as our overarching cover. We have Jesus. We access God through Jesus. And then we come down to the family. And what do we have? We have the husband is the head of the household. He's ultimately responsible for everything that happens beneath his care. The wife comes in there, right there, as his co-helper. But guess what? He's ultimately responsible, so he's just a little bit above, okay? He's a little bit up that call sheet, all right? So his authority is over his household. It's also over his wife. Now, that's not to be domineering or to be abusive or to be boorish, but rather it is a place of greater responsibility because guess what? If something's going wrong in the Jones household and God knocks on the door and he wants to deal with somebody, Lindsay opens the door, she can go, hold on a second, let me go get Jonathan. I ain't got to deal with this. It's a mess, and guess what? She might be responsible, but who's ultimately responsible? I'm ultimately responsible. All right? And so she kind of gets a get-out-of-jail-free card on that because guess what? I'm the one that God's going to come and deal with first. I'm the one that God's going to hold accountable for whatever happens in my household. Even if it ain't my fault, it's my responsibility. Okay? And so then under that, under my care, under Lindsay's care, then comes the children, okay? And the children are under the care of Lindsay. They're under the care of Jonathan. They're under the care of Jesus. Ultimately, they're under the care of God. We have this umbrella effect of protection going down, okay? So in the same way, when we come into the house of God, ultimately, who is most responsible in the house of God? The men. The men. They're ultimately most responsible. Now think of it this way. Let's go ahead and let's clear the air a little bit. Okay. Are women capable of being smart? Oh yeah, right. Are women capable of having good ideas? Yeah, okay. Are women capable of having creativity that is different from a man? Yeah, is women's input, is women's wisdom, is women's insight to be valued? Yes, okay. But God created two different creatures, didn't he? He created male and he created female. And he gifted and equipped them differently. Men cannot have babies. Like women, that's a superpower. That's pretty special. That's very unique, and that's just for the women. I don't even understand how that happened. I've watched it. I've watched Lindsay give birth 5 times. I don't understand. I thought I married a woman. She actually was a transformer. Okay, like it just I don't understand. All right, but it happens. It's a miracle, and God reserved that blessing for her. Okay, and so she's different, and she's just it. Okay, in the same way, men are driven and equipped differently. And so when God looked at those two creatures, then he placed certain duties and certain authorities upon the man, and certain duties and certain authorities upon the woman, certain functions upon the man, and certain functions upon the woman. He just did that. Now, do you think he made a mistake? Nah, he created both them things. He knows what each one's going to be good at. Now, it reminds me, way back in the day when I was working with AT&T, and we had this situation. This dude was crazy and on drugs, came in, made a bunch of threats and stuff, and so they put extra security in the store. All right, and they told us, they said, don't worry. They said, we're going to bring security into the store, so y'all don't have anything to worry about. And I said, oh, that's great. And you know who showed up the next day? This 8-month pregnant lady. And she showed up, and boy, she had pants with a stripe down the side, and she had a badge on that said security. Okay, and she came in, and she said, well, where do you want me? And I said, I want you back in your car. And she said, well, why? And I said, because y'all don't know this, but like I used to actually be in shape and all. And I said, because I can bench press 400 pounds, and you're 8 months pregnant. I said, because if the bad guy comes in here, and I've got to now protect you too. You're supposed to be protecting me. Like I need a dude with a taser or a gun or something so that I don't have to wrestle this crazy fella. Now I got to wrestle him, make sure you don't get kicked at the same time. I was like, so this ain't going to work, okay? And it's not that she wasn't smart, and it wasn't that she wasn't, nice and pleasant or any of those things. It was just simply that that's not her function. That's not her job, okay, to protect Jonathan. It's Jonathan's job to protect her, protect any female, protect his family, protect what's around, And so that was the function. And so I told her, I said, hey, I just need you to go back home. I said, I'm sorry, I'll call the people and I'll tell them we need somebody else, all right? And so then they sent me a really tall, big, broad-shouldered fella that slept on top of the shredder every day. And he was just on the corner. He slept on top of the shred bin every day, just snored, And so I felt real safe, all right? But in that, it's just a different function. It's the same thing of, if we have something to do that's physically demanding, if a man sees a woman struggling with a heavy load, what's that man going to do? He's going to go get that heavy load. Let me take that. You might wrestle with it, and you could do it, but it's going to be a whole lot easier if I do it. You shouldn't have to bear that load because that load is upon me, okay? In the same way, in the church house, the authority, the responsibility, the load, God placed on the men. He placed that on the men. So, women are smart, they're creative, they're capable, they have wisdom, they have experience, they have all kinds of great features, all right? And they are possible for them to lead awesomely. But God didn't place that burden on them in the church. In the business world, she might run circles around us. But in the church, God said, no, you carry that burden. He placed it upon the men. So, we have that picture, we have that function, and he says that when we come into the church, the world might say that women are just dumb sex objects. The church don't believe that. The church says, no, let them come in, let them learn. Out in the world, there may be a prize or a premium put upon the loud, unruly, boisterous woman that's like a gold ring in a pig's snout. And they may place a a big value on the loud hooker, but in the church, we place a big value on the chaste, wise mother. Okay. Out in the world, they may place a premium on the rebellious woman that can't keep her feet at home and are just all in the streets. And man, she's just got all the juicy gossip. They may place a value on that, but we don't place a value on that in the church. The church is different. It's a different sphere. And so Paul is dealing with this. He says in verse 12, "And I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man, but to be in silence." Okay, here we go. So we got another verse, right? He says, "But I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man." And a lot of Pentecostal churches, a lot of Episcopal churches, they've looked and they said, "Do you see that? Paul said, I." And that's just Paul. That ain't Jesus. That ain't the Holy Spirit. That's just Paul. Paul said, "I don't do that." So if Paul's setting up a church, Paul says no. But, if Timmy or Ricky or Sue or Bob wants to set one up over here, they don't have to follow what Paul said because Paul said, "I." You know what the problem is? In the original Greek, there ain't no "I" there. There's no "I" there. So when we read it in the original Greek, it's not, "and I do not permit a woman." In the original Greek, it would read, "and do not permit a woman to teach." It's amazing whenever you can read good, how you can find stuff out. So a lot of what they're placing that on, they try to prove against this. They're trying to prove against an English word that was inserted versus the original language when Paul wrote it. Paul didn't say "I." Paul said, "Do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man." Okay. So, are women allowed to teach in church? Yep. Yeah. Yeah, they can, right? Women are allowed to teach in church. They just can't teach them. Yeah, a lot of times you wouldn't have any teachers, right? That's right. So, ladies just can't teach men. So we don't have a men's class and put a lady in charge of it. We don't have that. If we have a mixed class, then, a mixed sex class, then we should have a couple in charge of it where the man takes the strong lead in the teaching role of that class. All right. So, can women teach children? Yeah. Could women teach boys? Yeah, because they're not men, are they? Yep. In fact, there's a command for the older women to teach who? The younger women. All right. So, he's not talking about the classes other than a men's class. What his priority is that he's talking about is in the general assembly when the men are present too. All right. So in the general assembly where the men are present too, then guess what? The men teach. Can any man teach? No. No. God rules out a whole lot of men that are not allowed to teach. All right. And so with that, it's not like it's okay, well, if he's a man, he gets to teach, but if it's a woman, can't teach. So if we have the most brilliant woman or the most dunder-headed man, then the man takes precedent over the woman. No, it's actually both of them aren't allowed. Both of them aren't allowed. So it's not just because he's a man he can teach. No, God calls and gifts and equips teachers. That's a God-called office. When we get to the fivefold ministry, guess what's sitting right in there? Teacher. So, no, it's not simply ruling her out because of her sex. It is, but at the same time, not every man is qualified to teach either. So he's starting to winnow it down. He's starting to show it out here. So he says that, well, let me ask you this. Okay. So we've got a class. I'm going to give you some hypotheticals, and y'all work it out with me, okay? We've got a class, and it says, Martha is going to teach how to change diapers Saturday in the fellowship hall. All welcome to attend. And we got a man signs up for that class. Do we have a problem? No, we don't have a problem. All right. Does she have any authority over Billy Bob if he signs up to the diaper changing class? No, that's not a thing, is it? Okay. Um, what if we have a we decide we're going to have a women's conference, and we know this lady who's really sharp and she's really bright, and we ask that woman to come in and teach that women's conference. Is that allowed? Yeah, yeah. But now what if Shane shows up to run the music? Yeah, yeah, she's still allowed, right? Okay, yeah. All right, we're all in agreement. All right. Now, what if it's Mother's Day, and that real sharp lady, I decide that we're going to put her in the pulpit for the Mother's Day sermon? No, no, can't do that. Can't do that. Okay. And so we have to use some wisdom there and all. And like I said, if we're not careful, we'll stray into that egalitarianism or even complementarianism, where with what the Bible teaches clearly and succinctly for generations is a patriarchal view of the family. That's it. All right. And he starts, what he appeals to is he appeals to Adam. Verse 13, he says, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. He's going all the way back to creation to prove his point. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Oh, Adam wasn't deceived? Well, if Adam wasn't deceived, what does that mean? He knew what he was doing. Adam made a choice. Adam rebelled. She made a mistake. He made a decision. All right. So, Adam, here, he's got this woman that God just presented to him. He just went into a deep sleep, woke up. There was a naked woman. God said, this is her. And he started saying his love song, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, all that kind of stuff. And man, they were living in harmony. And all of a sudden, one day, he loses sight of her. She talks to a snake and eats an apple. Now we got a problem. Says, Eve, what'd you do? She said, I ate this thing. And Adam takes that thing and he eats too. She was deceived. She was beguiled. Was Adam deceived? Was Adam beguiled? Adam made a decision. He made a decision. He said, uh-oh, God might take that thing away from me. If she's going, I'm going too. He ate too. He made a decision to eat. Now, what's important, what's fun to see, is when God shows up and he goes, Adam, where you at, buddy? Adam. Adam's hiding, right? And God says, oh, there you are. Well, what's going on? And he says, well, I was naked and I hid. And God said, who told you were naked? And who does Adam blame? Eve. He says, that woman you gave me. All right. He made a decision, and then he tried to cover his decision by blaming his wife. He said, she's to punish for my transgression. You punish my bride for my decision. Then we have the second Adam comes along. Jesus comes along, and what? He dies for his bride. He said, I am sinless. My bride is flawed. But Father, pour it out on me, not on her. He's a second Adam. He's a perfect Adam. Now, what would have happened if Adam would have stepped forward and he would have said, I sinned. I rebelled. Place it on me. What would have happened? Or what if when Eve was deceived and she was beguiled and she made a mistake and Adam sees it and he goes, hey, instead of participating and instead of hiding from the Father, we need to go to the Father. What would have happened then? I think nothing would have happened. I think God would have just said, okay. Because Adam was in charge. If Adam would have took care of it, God wouldn't have had to. So that's my personal belief. Don't make theology out of that. Don't teach it to your kids. Just think about it. Okay. All right, it says, for Adam was formed first. Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. He says, nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. All right, so we don't even need to have altar calls for ladies, right? Women just get saved in the maternity ward. Is that what that means? Then what does that mean? All right. Now, he is talking about a transformation that'll happen here. He's talking about a revelation that'll happen here. Because what's happening is instead of the usurpation of the roles, and instead of her trying to catch her husband and overtake her husband, what we're actually seeing is her acceptance of the role, her acceptance of the created order, and her acceptance of God's mission for her. Let's turn over to Genesis chapter 3. In Genesis chapter 3, you get about halfway into the chapter, and we're going to go verse 13. So Genesis 3:13. And it says, "And the Lord said to the woman, 'What is this that you have done?' And the woman said, 'The serpent deceived me, and I ate.' So the Lord God said to the serpent," all right, so here comes the serpent's curse. He says, "Because you've done this, you're more cursed than all the cattle, and every other beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust." All right, so now we know some stuff about this old serpent, don't we? We always thought it was a snake. Did it ever say snake? It didn't. It said serpent. Okay. Now, there's a whole lot of serpents, right? Can a lizard be a serpent? Yeah, and in fact, in Revelation, when we see this serpent reappear, what's it called in Revelation? In the Greek, it's called a dragon. All right. So now we see that it has to crawl on its belly. So if that's a curse, then what had to have occurred before the curse? It didn't crawl on its belly. So now what did it do? If it didn't crawl on its belly, what did it do? Maybe it had feet. Maybe it walked. But now, things don't just walk. Like there's other ways of getting around. Maybe it had wings. Maybe it could flap its wings and fly around. All right. Maybe who knows what it could have done. That thing might have been a teleporter. It might have just been all over the place. That'd be a horrible, right? Snakes that could just pop up. Oh man, that sounds like a horror movie. Okay. Lifeway gets a hold of that. I get some royalties. Okay. And so with that, here we know that now it's cursed and it has to crawl on its belly. So something changed when it got cursed. Now it had to crawl on its belly. Then it said it eats the dust. It eats rubbish. It eats trash. So something changed, right? So before it didn't do that. It must have ate something else. And it says, "All the days of your life I'll put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed." So now that thing's got seed. We know that. "He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." All right. So the head is what? The head's out front. All right. The head of an army, that's the one that's out front, the one that's in charge, the top shelf, the ruler. And then when he said, "You shall bruise his heel," that would happen at the rear of the army. All right. So we see that the seed of the woman is going to crush the head of the seed of the serpent. But that the seed of the serpent is just going to strike the heel of the seed of the woman. All right? All right. Everybody get it? All right. So, there we see that. And you say, "John, I thought we was talking about women." All right, we are. We're getting to it. Verse 16. "To the woman, he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children." All right, so if that's a curse, what changed? What was it before the curse? No pain. You just pop them things out and keep going. I had to take no time off from work or no pain pills, no nothing. All right, just have a baby, just not even realize it. Oh, look, there's another one. Let's name it. It was just crazy, easy. Okay. Now we got painful childbirth because of the curse. "Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule after you." That word desire has the connotation like a runner trying to chase and overtake one that's in front of him. All right, so trying to catch, trying to overtake, trying to take the place of. That there's always going to be this dynamic between men and women over who's in charge. That she's always going to have a desire to dominate, but she's not in a dominating position. All right. And it says, but did y'all notice something? Her curse is 4 lines long, and do you see what every bit of it has to deal with? It all has to do with the family. It all is domestically focused. Did it ever say that she was going to have to get out there in the fields and pick cotton and pull weeds? No, that wasn't her curse. Her curse was entirely domestic in nature. It was about children, it was about marriage, it was about family. That was it. Now look at Adam's curse. Verse 17. And then to Adam he said, because you've heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. So the ground used to not be cursed. In toil you shall eat of it. Used to, he didn't have to toil to eat. Stuff just worked. You know, I've never, in my 43 years, I've never walked through the woods and just suddenly there's a grand orchard. Now, I see a bunch of tall grass. I see a bunch of weeds. I see a bunch of thorns and a bunch of thistles. I see a bunch of just trash, trees and shrubs and stuff like that. I've never come upon a perfect manicured garden that somebody didn't have to work and didn't have to make. So he says, now it's going to take toil to eat of it. All the days of your life, both thorns and thistles, it shall bring forth for you. Used to didn't have thorns. Used to didn't have thistles. And you shall eat of the herb of the field. Now you got to grow your own food, Adam. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So we've got Adam's curse, we've got Eve's curse, we've got them completely different. Here, the man's curse is geared towards work, and the woman's curse is geared towards marriage and family. That's it. Here, God creates different spheres. So he gives the sphere of the home to the woman. She's the homemaker. He's the head over it. All right, he's got veto authority, but in that, that's her domain. Now, what that looks like is on the mailbox, it says Jones. My house. Everything goes on, it's my house. There's problems, it's my house. And when I get to the door, and I open that door, and Lindsay says, hey, take your shoes off before you come in. You know what I say? It's my house, yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yep. You know why? Because when I married her, I put her in that house, and I gave her domain over that house. I said, hey, you rule this for me. You take care of this. And those children, when those children come along, guess what? Them children better respect and obey mama. If not, daddy's going to deal with it. It ain't pretty. All right? And in return, I expect her to educate them in morals and in ethics and in learning and all of that. That's her responsibility. That's her sphere. That's what I gave her. And there's her thing. Now, the curse is that a lot of men don't want to work. They go contrary to their curse. They don't fulfill their masculine duty that God created them. God said that he should work. And then, even in the 10 Commandments, he reinforces it, trying to de-Egyptify these Hebrews coming out of Egypt. And he says, what? 6 days you shall work, but the 7th day, that's the Sabbath, that's the rest, that's to the Lord. Okay? So, he reiterates to the man, hey, your job's to work. And if you don't work, you're not achieving your masculine duty before God. And then he turns to the female and he says, your job's the marriage, your job's the family, your job's the children. And if you're not achieving that, you're against your purpose and your gift and your calling, your commandment of the Lord. That's it. So, you ever wondered how, like, a girl turns 18, 19, gets a job, gets a little money, maybe she goes to college, or she gets a job, gets her first apartment, and you walk into that first apartment and you look around, and what does it look like? Just like home. She's got couches, she's got flowers, she's got stuff up on the walls, she's got decorations, she's got to have little widgets and digits and all these little things around, and she's got all this decoration. You open the fridge, and there's food in there, and like she's cooking meals and stuff, like she's made her own little home. Guy turns 18, gets his first job, decides he's going to move out. He moves into this house. You go over there, what does it look like? A mess. That's right. He may or may not own a broom, don't know how to do laundry. He'll just go buy new clothes instead of washing them. And you open the fridge, what's in there? Ain't hardly nothing in there, all right? There's usually ketchup and beer. That's about it, all right? And then you go on into this, and in his living room, what's his furniture? Maybe he's got an old broke couch that's nasty and stained, but probably he's got a lawn chair. And it's a nice lawn chair. He's proud of it. And a big TV, right? 80-inch TV in front of that tiny little metal lawn chair, all right? All right, because he's not geared for that home. He's geared for work. And he'd rather buy new tools than to buy a bedroom suit. Why does he need a bedroom suit? There's a mattress on the floor. I don't need a bedroom suit. Why do I need decoration in my bedroom? I close my eyes in there. Like I don't even see the stuff most of the time I'm in there. Doesn't make any sense. That's a waste of money to him. He's geared towards work. With her, she'll make the house smell good, and she ain't even there most of the day. She's got a thing timed to release potpourri while she's at work, just so she knows it smells good while she's not there. Her heart is geared towards the home. God just made it natural and normal. He ingrained it. It's not society. It's God given. It's just what he did. So, what he's showing is that instead of rebelling against the design of God, rather, when she embraces the design of God in childbearing, in giving birth to children, in marriage and in family, when she focuses on that, there's her salvation. Not a work, that she does this to be saved, but rather that is an outgrowth, that is a fruiting that she truly knows the God, and she's embracing what God's created her for. She's embracing what God has said. All right? And he says that it's not just the act of having children, but continuing in faith, continuing in love, continuing in holiness with self-control. So faith is believing enough to base your behavior by it. Love is self-sacrifice. And holiness means what God says is what's right, and that's what we do. And then self-control means that I control myself. I ain't doing this because my husband made me. I ain't doing this because I'm afraid of the consequences. I ain't doing this for any other reason than I know I'm supposed to do this. She's in control of herself. The decision she's making for herself. Okay? So it's because of her duty before God. It's because of her pledge before God. It's because of how God created her that then she's saying, okay, yep, this is me. This is what I do. All right. Does that make sense? All right. I'm going to pause and let anybody, y'all got any questions?